This is Architecture 360. I'm Lee Bay. She designed the Chicago Riverwalk and two of the finest-looking L stations to hit the city in 50 years. And when terrorists blew up the Oklahoma Federal Building 20 years ago, she designed a new one that was open, airy, attractive, and safer. Chicago architect Carol Ross Barney of Ross Barney Architects is with us today to talk about her work, the Lifetime Achievement Award she just won, and maybe, just maybe, the planned Obama Presidential Library. Carol, thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here, Lee.
When I mentioned the Oklahoma Federal Building, I couldn't believe my own words that it's been 20 years this year since Timothy McVeigh detonated that truck bomb there and 168 people were killed. But your design response to the terrorist act, talk about that a bit.
That was such an interesting commission because it was really the first time that domestic terrorism was a big deal in the United States. There'd been some other instances, but they were never close to home. We had done a series of schools here in Chicago in kind of inner city neighborhoods. And the selection panel thought that our schools were very defensible, but open and home-like. And so we got the commission because even then, there was a notion that if this building was going to succeed, it would have to feel strong so that you feel safe, but it would have to be open so as not to defeat the idea of open government for the people.
Now, a lot of glass and public space, obviously, outdoor public space. Talk a little bit about what's there.
Well, the final design, it occupies one whole city block. The Oklahoma City blocks are larger than Chicago blocks. But what we did is we scooped out the center. We have a garden, basically, a U-shaped garden in the center. You could probably call the building horseshoe-shaped. But on the edges, on the block sides, it became a very city-like building. It maintained the normal setbacks that you would expect, maybe a little bit more, because one of the interesting things about blast, when you're designing against blast, is if you can increase the distance between the source and the target, that's good. It decreases the force of the blast better than anything else you could do. But basically, it's a very city building. It is in downtown Oklahoma City. So that side is more formal. It's made out of concrete. And then when you come in to the building, into the park, it's all glass. And we could accomplish that because it was inside, because it wasn't close to a point where someone could plant a bomb. The building was designed to not fail the way the first one did. So it's mostly about blast.
So when it failed, the building's sort of pancakes, right? The truck bomb goes off at the bottom of the building, of course, and then kind of collapses.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Timothy McVeigh was, I don't know if he knew much about structures, but he managed to pick the most vulnerable part of that building. I think it was probably by chance. There was an auditorium on the first floor, and it was a very, very narrow building. And at the point that the auditorium was placed, they put in transfer beams so you could have a big space. He parked his truck right outside one of those transfer beams. That was the most vulnerable column. And when it was gone, because it took out such a big beam, the building tore itself down.
As a country, how have we dealt with design post 9/11?
Well, the immediate reaction was to make everything quite hard and to figure out a way that you could thwart the terrorists. I think because a lot of buildings weren't done immediately after that, it was a good thing. The Oklahoma City bombing coincided with attacks on U.S. embassies, too, abroad. And so both the Department of State and the GSA were working on standards for buildings to make them more defendable. There's a big question about where should you put an embassy? What's an embassy for? Is it an outpost of the U.S. that is neighborly and friendly, or is it, a sanctuary for U.S. citizens in that country? It actually plays both roles. But which one do you express, and how do you do that?
Now a little closer to home, the new Cermak elevated train station just south of downtown. It just won an AIA Building Excellence Award. The station is a tube, and the L runs through it, but there's more. So tell us about it.
There is a building by Rem Koolhaas just down the next stop on the
35th.
station. Yeah, It belongs to IIT. It's his McCormick Welcome Center. And everybody keeps on saying, well, are they related? And actually not. Ours is really occupied. People stand in the tube, and they're protected from the elements. The tube is perforated so it can breathe. On hot days, wind can go through it, but it blocks enough of the Chicago wind off the lake during cold temperatures that you don't get a direct wind. Basically, it buffers it. So ours is really occupied. People really stand in it, and they wait for their train.
We both remember maybe 20, 25 years ago, there was talk of tearing that whole line down. The green line is a L-shaped line that runs west of the city from Oak Park and then kind of curves through downtown and goes south. And the ridership had gotten to the point of less than the city wanted and needed a lot of repairs. And there was open talk about ripping it down. And now it's in renaissance.
Completely revitalized.
Another hit is the Chicago Riverwalk along the Chicago River on the northern edge of downtown. We used to treat the river pretty badly in this city, but tell us how this project, which began some years ago, helped us to embrace it.
Yeah, the river. I love the river. I've been working on that project for 15 years. I have to tell you that I've had good associates. We've worked with Collins Engineers on Phase 1, which goes from Michigan Avenue to Wabash. And then for the last 6 blocks, we're working with Sasaki Associates from Boston. But the river is so interesting. There have been a lot of people who have been thinking about the river in Chicago for many, many years. Planners and architects look at it and they say, there's potential here that's not realized. So there have been many plans for the river. I have to tell you, we're indebted to all those plans. It's something that needed to be done. When Burnham wrote the plan of Chicago, he thought the river was very important. And if you look at his renderings of Wacker Drive, he also made this esplanade, promenade, that people were supposed to be able to walk along the river. The problem is when the city finally went ahead in 1935, I think was the right year, and built the Wacker improvement, the plan worked out great. We made this level for traffic, but the esplanade went from bridge house to bridge house instead of along the river. So it meant that you could walk along it, you could walk along the promenade, but then you'd have to climb a staircase, cross the street, climb down a staircase, and continue walking. So needless to say, it was never very popular as a walk. The problem was to connect the walkway past under the bridge houses. And anybody who's been down there has to say, wow, because even though I lived with this thing forever and I'm a Chicagoan and I see it daily, my office is on the river, I was amazed at the popularity. I shouldn't have been, because I think that this is a type of improvement that cities need if they're going to be livable.
Just so people can understand, it's not just a trail by the river. It has a different feel. It changes shape and attitude and things as you walk down on it.
The bridges cross over the river at major streets, and it gives it almost a room-like feel, each portion of the Riverwalk. And so our design idea was to use river typologies to develop those rooms, we called them. So we have the first one that was completed this year is called the Marina. New thing for Chicago, you can actually tie up your boat in the marina. You never could stop on the Chicago River before. So we have boat tie-ups. By the way, that's a funding source to pay back the loan. You have to pay parking. The next one is called the Cove, and it's designed to accommodate human-powered craft. Kayaking's become pretty popular on the river. In fact, there is a kayak to work group. And then in the next room, the last one that was open this year, is called the River Theater. And that is in the middle of the final extent of the Riverwalk. And what we wanted to do there, in the end, it'll be over a mile long. And what we wanted to do there is we wanted to bend the city down to the river. The 20-foot difference between Wacker, we wanted to erase it. And so we made a grand staircase and ramp that roll right down from Wacker Drive to the river. So for the first time, standing on Wacker, you can see the water. There have been performances in it. I was there. I happened to be there this last Saturday. Someone was getting married in the River Theater. It's crazy.
We're talking to architect Carol Ross Barney about her work and the Lifetime Achievement Award she just won. So moving on a little bit, you say that good design is not a privilege, but a right. What does that mean?
I think good design, meaning livable communities, good housing, healthy schools, healthy shopping, is a right. And that's what good design is. fortunately not too often in our country, but often it's restricted to an elite class of people who can afford it. I think that's wrong. I think design is social justice. I felt this way for a long time. Our studio does almost exclusively public work. And the reason that we do it is because, first of all, we think we can really make change there. I believe in change because I think that's the only way things get better, is if you do make innovations. We can make change because not only are we the architects and designers, we're also the clients. We're really invested in it. And I feel very strongly about this. I think that one of the things that Americans need to guard is their just society, and cities and city planning is not often thought of in those terms, but it's one of the biggest ways to get there.
So now that leads us to the AIA Gold Medal for Lifetime Achievement. How does it feel to get that? And I should point out that you're a full generation younger than Frank Gehry, for example. And when Frank Lloyd Wright was your age or thereabout, he hadn't even designed falling water yet. So you've got some runway left. This isn't like an end of the career kind of thing, gold watch. You've got some runway left. But still, how does it feel to get that award?
I have mixed feelings. I do. I always think I'm too young to get awards like that too. I mean, it's like, oh my God, what happened? We were having fun. It really takes a long time. Now, I don't know. When I started my firm, it took us a few years to get the first project, the real first project. We had little projects. And the first one was a school. It was a post office. I'm sorry. Since it was a post office, it went rather slowly. It had a lot of approvals and things like that. And we completed it 6 or 7 years after we opened the doors to the office for the first time. And Oklahoma City Federal Building, for example, we began that in 1997, 2 years after the bombing, and it opened in 2004. And that's typical. So I think I have a lot of time left.
Now, reportedly, your firm is one of the many invited from Chicago and across the planet to compete in the Obama Presidential Library Project. What can you tell us about that?
I think that is the premier job of the century. I'd love to do that job. And the reason I'd like to do it is the program that the Obamas put out about it. It is a program that, again, is about communities and about equality and about making our society better. And those are the buildings that I've looked for forever. And it would just be a great honor to do that. I'd say that the competition is pretty stiff. Reportedly sent 40 invitations out. And then they said, also, anyone else who wants to send us their qualifications, please do. And they got 120 responses.
Wow.
So, I mean, I'm swimming upstream right now, but I'm still swimming hard. So I think it's a great project. The 2 sites in Chicago are really wonderful sites. They're exquisite. I am a former Hyde Parker, and I'm very familiar with both sites. I like them both for different reasons. And just to let the listeners know, the 2 sites are both on the south side of Chicago. One is closer to the lake, closer to the Museum of Science and Industry, around 60-something in Stony Island. 60th, yeah. And the other one is a little further west, right on the western edge of the park called Washington Park, not too far west of the University of Chicago. The eastern site was the site of the Women's Building in the Columbian Exposition. So I think they need to select a woman architect. What kind of building or what kind of campus do you sense that they want here? Whoever designs it, it won't look like other presidential libraries. The brief that was put out by the Obama Foundation includes unusual functions for a library, a community health clinic, a vegetable garden, but it does reflect the populist theme of his presidency and of his life. But you won't see marble columns and formal staircases that look like old Rome or something. I don't think so. If they pick me, they won't. Now, tell us what's next for your firm, Ross Barney Architects, and for you, and what can we expect to see from you and the firm in the next year or so? We have some educational projects that I think will be very exciting. Education is an area that's really changing, both in program and in the spot it has in the community. A lot of colleges and universities in the last maybe decade have decided that design is part of their DNA. It's part of their calling card. For example, we work for the University of Minnesota Duluth, and they wanted buildings that expressed the Iron Range, that their place on Earth. It was a lot of fun to work up there.
Certainly some of the better architecture I've seen in the last 5 or 8 years really been from universities that have broken away from sort of brick and marble and columns and, old quads and really are doing some really forward-looking things.
I agree. I think some really exciting work has been done at universities and colleges lately.
Architect Carol Ross Barney, thank you for joining us.
It's good to talk to you.
I'm Lee Bay, and thank you for listening to Architecture 360. Check me out on Facebook at Lee Bay Chicago and follow me on Twitter under my name. Join me next time.